Now, why is the text of Enkidu dying and going into the underworld and Gilgamesh following him into the underworld and trying to get him out so important? Because in the hero's journey, which has certain junctures, it's as old as the earliest classics in Western civilization, which conventionally speaking go back to Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey. You know Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey? You would have looked at them? Okay, so arguably the Odyssey is a better text, right? But the Iliad is also amazing about the Trojan War and Odysseus, pardon? It's so true. No, the Odyssey is a better text because the Iliad is very repetitive and it has a very important, let's say, underlying theme, or very important underlying themes about the problems of passion and anger and how they can affect entire civilizations, and the magnanimous, let's say, disposition of Achilles at the end when he gives Hector's body back to Priam, King Priam, and so on. But I don't want to dwell on that. The Odyssey is about one of the generals, the king of Ithaca, of the Greeks, on the side of the Greeks, who after the Trojan War wants to go back home, right? And he wants to go back to his home island of Ithaca. You know the story. He leaves Troy. He was the one who devised the whole idea of the Trojan horse. We'll look at this next week. But on the way of departure from a familiar territory, which is Troy, he'd been there for many years, he undergoes various perils that bring him to the lowest point of his journey, the nadir, the lowest point. And generally speaking, the hero in any story, the protagonist, has to experience that lowest point in order to be transformed and continue on their journey, to be given the secret information or knowledge, or to have undergone the most difficult, let's say, experience that compels them to lift their game and to be transformed. And then there's no going back. Right? So that begins with the Gilgamesh epic. It's refined in the Odyssey. It's there in Virgil's Aeneid that we'll look at in a couple of weeks' time. It's there when Luke Skywalker is suffering from the cold on the planet Hoth and he sees the ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi go to the Dagobah system, and then he does the training with Yoda and he goes into the cave. It's essential to any good story. It can be utterly secularized as well. It can be when the protagonist is down on his luck, his wife has left him, he's gotten embroiled in crime and drugs, but he has to find his way out of it again, right? That's the modern kind of hell, metaphorically speaking, that you'll see in many movies, right? But it's all part and parcel of that journey, okay? In Christianity, it's supercharged, because Jesus dies on the cross and his soul goes to hell. But he doesn't go to hell and then come out transformed. Partly he does. But because he's the God of the universe, he destroys hell entirely. Takes Adam and Eve out. It's next level descent into Hades with Christianity, right? So that's all very interesting. And why I dwell upon it at this particular juncture is that it's important for artistic representations of that lowest experience, not only in the hero's journey in ancient, classical, and early Christian texts, the hero par excellence being the Son of God, Jesus, but it's also essential for representations of hell as the place of torment for those who do not fight against their passions and sins in medieval Christian art. So representations of hell or the underworld in medieval Christian art, as exemplified in a literary sense by Dante in his Divine Comedy, right, are full, they're redolent with symbolism. Okay, that symbolism is, well, if you're the ultimate sinner in Dante, which means you've betrayed someone, then you get sucked on by one of Satan's heads at the very bottom of hell, by Cerberus, the very bottom. You know who's at the very bottom of hell in Dante? Who is it? Further. Judas. Who else? Brutus. And they're being devoured by the heads of Cerberus, yeah? The three-headed dog. And then other sinners have other, but that's, it's not a literal representation of hell. If you want to talk about what the ancient Christians believed in relation to the experience of heaven and hell in the afterlife, that's another story, right? It has to do with the way God is experienced, either positively or negatively, depending on whether or not one has oriented his or her will towards him in this life. It's not an actual underground place with pitchforks and knives and all these symbols are meant to teach people not to do certain things that will harm them and others. Yeah, but that all begins here. If you don't have these conceptual categories, you can't build upon them, which is what Christianity did later on. In the art, which we were going to see. So that's how it links to the rest of the course. Let me check in with my UNDA friends. How you all doing? Are you excited by Gilgamesh's trip to the underworld?
Yes. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I'm going to move to Egypt now.
Great.
Oh, hang on. It's 3:30. Shall we move to the other room and talk about Egypt there? Because I think, is someone taking this room soon? There's a lecture here in like 10 minutes. Okay. So are you, but please let me know, are you happy to talk about Egypt for another hour and we finish up? Yeah, okay. So the group is happy here for me to move to another room, which I'm going to do now, but I won't turn it off. I'll just turn the video and the audio off because the room is just across the hall. Okay. I'll be back. After our ordeal, we've descended into the underworld together. We've come back up renewed. No, yes, yeah. Yeah. Now that we are able to tackle the last part of our voyage through the earlier civilizations, does anybody have any questions or comments or observations that they'd like to make? Anything? Russia.
Why is it all the same but different? Like,
why is it the same but different?
If they're all different, like kind of periods, like I guess they're kind of similar area to an extent, but do we know why they're so similar? Like almost like identical, just different names?
Because all of these artistic and architectural and literary enterprises are produced by humans, and humans have more in common than they don't, no matter where they are. And there are various ways of accounting for this. You can theologically call it the image of God in human beings, which is expressed as a creative impulse, okay? To see things in the world and to want to imitate them by creating replicas. That's what we do when we draw, when we do art, and so on and so forth. It could be archetypal in a Jungian sense, that any human being, given certain external stimuli, will respond in the same way, irrespective of the social, historical, or cultural conditions. That makes sense to a degree, because fire is always associated with light, nourishment, warmth, whether you're one end of the world or another, right? So I think that accounts for the commonalities. The differences have to do with uniqueness in ways of thought. Mesopotamians were bleak, and the uniqueness in these ways of thought, ways of thinking, have to do with differences in the geographical context and environment. Mesopotamia is arid, it's dry, it's full of desert, right? Harsher perception of the world, harsher perception of the gods, harsher perception of the underworld. Egypt benefits by having the Nile Delta, which is verdant and rich in vegetation for at least 6 months of the year. More optimistic view of God and the gods and the afterlife. Make sense? Yeah.
I was going to ask, Utnapishtim, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. What do you think about the idea that he's actually Noah?
Of who?
Noah. I've heard some try to speculate that the Epic of Gilgamesh is somewhat connected to that.
Yeah, there are many Noahs. It's inescapable. The first 11 chapters of Genesis are written in mythic language. So we have a problem. What's literal and what isn't in Genesis from a Christian point of view? What can be taken very seriously in Genesis is the underlying theological message, which has a literalistic dimension in relation to Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are taken by many of the patristic interpreters as the first man and woman to experience God. They're not necessarily the first human beings to be made. That's there in the text, but that's not a problem theologically. Pardon?
Is that not in Humane Genesis?
Yeah, the church has now, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But, we're talking even from, so it's like they're the first to experience God and fall away, right? And that message is relevant for us. Yeah, obviously. But sometimes you have to state the obvious, even if it isn't. And even the church has to state the obvious. So there may have been an Adam, right? But Adam just means man. So who knows what his name was, actually? Pardon? Rasha. I don't know what his name was, okay? We don't know. But Adam is significant primarily not because his name is Adam, which just means man in Hebrew, but because you have the Ben Adam, who is who? Ios to anthropo in Greek, the Son of Man, Jesus. Nothing in the Old Testament needs stand on its own from a Christian point of view. And Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. Why? In other words, Ben Adam. The next Adam, because he succeeds where the old Adam failed, right? Through disobedience, the old Adam failed. Through obedience to God the Father, the new Adam succeeds, the Son of God and the Son of Man. He succeeds precisely because he has divine origins as the Son of God, right? So Adam is only significant. He's only significant in light of what Christ does. And the Son of Man, Ben Adam motif, is used by Jesus to link himself to Adam in the Genesis narrative, but also to link himself to that figure who is seen by the prophet Daniel standing before the Ancient of Days, who has universal authority over all peoples and nations. And the prophet Daniel only sees that figure because he has a conception of what the human being should have been, but wasn't because of the fall, right? So it's all layered. Now, Noah, did he exist as Noah? Was he called Noah? We don't know really. I mean, the church remembers him as Noah, and that's good enough. But there's also Deucalion in the Greek tradition, who survives the flood. Deucalion, you can look him up. There's Ziusudra in the Mesopotamian tradition. It's not problematic for there to have been a flood. There was a flood, right, in that region. There must have been, because all the myths pick up on it. All the religions, all the cultures talk about a flood myth. Now, the main hero in that myth has various names, but that's because those names speak to that particular culture. Things become different when you talk about Moses. Okay, Moses existed. He must have existed, right? As you get closer to history, David obviously existed as David, right? So the further back you go, the more mythical the language, but that doesn't mean untrue necessarily. Is that helpful? Mm-hmm. And there's a chat in the chat. I've got you. Same for me. Hey, Mario, screen recording is zoomed in the top left of PowerPoint. Not sure if it's just me. What does Zoom recordings, what does that mean? I'll try to fix it for you guys. Stop share and I'll share again. Okay. Let me close it and I'll share again. Any more questions while I'm trying to fix the Zoom? We've just gone on a bit of a good tangent. Not a bad tangent. It's good. Quit it on this. I don't know why. Move this here. Okay. And I'll fix it for you. We weren't talking about the slides anyway, so it's okay. Where'd it go? Topic one was here. Oh, I'm gonna go crazy. Let me type in topic one. Where did my slides disappear to? I'm going crazy today. That's unbelievable. Is it in the bin? How could it have got? Oh, there it is. You know, I hate it when Notre Dame does that automatic change of my background, and it's all in blue, and the folders are also blue. So you can't find anything. Like, it's just, anyway. I want mountains or something in the background, and that's the end of it. Okay. Can you all see it now, UNDA peeps? Yeah?
Thank
All good?
you.
Cool. No problem. That's fine. Thanks for letting me know. Any other questions or comments? Do that. Just so that I can see the screen. I'm not getting rid of it. That think it's not a bias. Anything? No, okay. Let's continue with Egypt. All right, where are we? Here it all gets crazy. It's great. Predynastic Egypt. General category for Predynastic Egypt, you're looking at 5,300 BC. So beginnings of the first town cities to 3,100 BCE, that there are towns and villages cropping up all across the verdant Nile Valley and Delta. You know that, of course, Egypt, its Upper Egypt is in the south of the country and Lower Egypt is in the north of the country where the Nile Delta is, precisely because that's the direction in which the Nile River flows. It flows from south to north, if you like, culminates in the Nile Delta. All right. So Going back to the timeline, we're not going to get too hung up here on the historical periods because there are many and they're interlocking, and we're going to get bogged down in those details, and I don't want us to. You have a development in the way that language is expressed through written form. You move from cuneiform to pictures, hieroglyphs, which is a Greek way of describing the mode of communication of the ancient Egyptians, because the Greeks didn't understand them, so they thought it must be sacred language. Ieros, or ieron, is holy or sacred. Glyphs from inscription, hieroglyphs, right? Thanks to the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, I think it was in the 19th century, which has, this is a providential discovery if there ever was one. Have you seen the Rosetta Stone? That's something out of Indiana Jones, the Rosetta Stone. Let me just stop the share. It's worth opening it up. And they discovered this stone. When was it discovered? I'm curious. We'll do the Wikipedia. You don't do that with your assessments. We'll do it now. It was decreed in the 2nd century BC, but when did archaeologists discover it? 19th century. Yeah, I thought so. Okay. It's got interlinear. I'll show it to you guys in a second online. Do you see it here? Hieroglyphs. What's this? Demotic Egyptian and Greek. And so scholars could work out what the hieroglyphs meant based on the Greek, because they knew ancient Greek. And they mapped out the whole system of hieroglyphics, the whole network of the language based on that. Before the 19th century, what the ancient Egyptians thought and believed was mostly transmitted via ancient Greek texts like Herodotus and others. People didn't know, but now scholars were able to either confirm what Herodotus believed was the case, because Greece was a tourist destination. Egypt was a tourist destination for the ancient Greeks. Now they could either verify or say that he didn't know what he was talking about. It's actually this god that was worshipped there, or that god that was worshipped here. How cool, huh? That's so cool. Anyway, if you look at some of the earliest, this is 13th century BC, you're already looking at the second intermediate. Now you're going into the New Kingdom. This is New Kingdom temple architecture. In terms of the temple structures in ancient Egypt, not much remains from the earliest stuff. There are floor plans like this, the Temple of Ptah. Ptah is one of the demiurges in the ancient Egyptian cosmogonies. He's the earth god who creates the world from atop the primordial hill that comes out of the formless expanse of the Nun, which is the Egyptian term for the primordial waters that extend forever and ever, and that basically have no beginning of existence but are always there. There's no real creation of the universe from an ancient Mesopotamian or Egyptian point of view. Whatever exists always exists, but at some point it is shaped into order and meaning from atop a hill. It's the same for the Egyptians as it was for the Mesopotamians. Yep.
You said demiurges, you mean there's multiple and they have like an assigned lot of matter, and they've got separate domains, or not just the one?
There's not just the one, because what happens is along the Nile River and the verdant areas on the banks, you have cities emerging, of course, because you can irrigate your crops. You're close to the river, right? And those cities had various emphases on which gods they placed at the top of their pantheon, the worship of all the gods. Initially, Memphis was the capital, and Memphis had Ptah as its main god. Memphis, you're thinking of Elvis when you think of Memphis, but it's Ptah was the main god. Eventually, Heliopolis, the Greek word for the sun city, becomes the capital. That predominates from the Old Kingdom onwards. And that has Ra as the main god, who is a sun god, because various aspects of the sun have different gods associated with them. The sun disk is its own god. It's the Aten. And that's really bizarre what happens in relation to that. Because in the 14th century BC, there's a renegade Pharaoh who basically stops believing in all of the other gods except for the Aten, the sun god. And he tries to make Egypt monotheistic. Akhenaten. Yeah. he changes all the references of Amun to Aten. And Aten becomes the only god, the Aten, the sun disk. He is the grandfather of Tutankhamun, who was originally Tutankhaten until they changed his name to Tutankhamun, because he restored the worship of Amun. Amun-Ra become interchangeable. Amun was the older name for the sun god. It gets associated with Ra. Does that make sense? It's a lot of interchangeability and flexibility in ancient Egyptian religion. Various aspects of a particular object in nature can be personified as gods. Okay. So, you get temple design. Look at that. That's beautiful, isn't it? That's the Hathor temple complex in Dendera. But the construction on that temple, which is more or less intact, is from the 1st century BC. What does it look like to you? With its columns. Pardon? Greek. It's Greek looking. Because Egypt. Well, at this point, it's going to be ruled by the Romans. Around this time is when Julius Caesar gets there, right? But yeah, Greek. Yeah.
Oh, I said the Pantheon.
Oh, yeah, could be. I mean, look, just because of the colonnaded design, it's not that the Egyptians didn't have columns, but in this period, it would have a Hellenistic twist. Here is the Ogdoad, the 8 main gods in the Egyptian pantheon. And they're all represented with serpent heads and frog heads here, but they don't necessarily have those sorts of heads. Very famously, Anubis, the god of the underworld, has a dog head, right? Ra is often associated as the Pharaoh personified, as a god, usually wearing the crown of the 2 lands of Egypt, Upper and Lower Egypt, which were united under King Nemes, which is represented in artistic form on this stone here, the Namo palette, it's called the Namo palette. The first ruler to unify Upper and Lower Egypt was maybe Nemes in 3000 BC, and the various symbols associated with Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt are put on his dress, and various gods associated with Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt are incorporated onto this kind of palette design that pretty much tells the story of the unification of the 2 lands. And you can look at these details in your own time because you'll have the slides. And he establishes the first capital, perhaps at Memphis. But this is also art telling a story. And that story is how this divinely inspired king united Egypt under his sole rule in the capital city of Memphis. And his patron would probably have been Ptah, if it's Memphis, right? But Ptah is overthrown eventually by Ra. The priesthood of Ra was very powerful. And part of what made the priesthood of Ra so powerful, and you'll find all of this stuff in the notes here. You can go back and have a look. You can also, to do some shameless, absolutely shameless self-promotion, to you guys as well online. I'll do it for you too. How does that sound? My book, based on my PhD, From the Ancient Near East to Christian Byzantium, covers all this stuff in detail. Okay. I wouldn't get it from Amazon. If you're interested in buying it, get it from the website of the actual publisher, and you put promo 25 in the checkout. I'm not telling you, but you don't have to. It's not mandatory. But you get 25% off if you buy it. 25% off, right? Let me share and show the friends online. You don't have to buy it. I'm not trying to sell it to you, okay? I don't make much royalties out of it anyway. It's just, to get the word out there. So that's my first book, and that addresses religious symbolism in all of these civilizations, beginning with ancient Mesopotamia, going through Egypt. And you can see the whole narrative there, the ancient Egyptian gods and the cities they were worshipped in and so on and so forth. And some of the, I think it's chapter 2 or 3. Okay, so from the ancient Near East to Christian Byzantium. Should I keep doing the self-promotion and we'll get back to Egypt? Some more self-promotion. If you're interested in more stuff on religious symbolism in cities, go to my YouTube channel, Terra Symbolic. Just that's where I'm in Rome. About 100 meters away from Santa Maria Maggiore. That's a whole bunch of travel vlogs and stuff from Rome, but also interviews with scholars on religious symbolism and just symbolism in various genres in film. We went and watched Nosferatu the other week and did a spiel on it with a friend of mine. We watched Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me, all that kind of stuff. So we kind of interested in doing that stuff. Did that share? Did you guys see that online? Shall I show you the rock and roll intro again, or you don't need to? It's all right.
It the whole sound just cut out, I think, when the rock and roll.
Ah, what a shame. Okay, well that means you have to go see it. I'm just having a bit of fun here. Okay, but no, seriously, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, that'll be great because I get more subscribers. It looks good, right? That goes for you online as well. Thank you very much. I'm only half kidding. It does help. I pursue all these other avenues of trying to get subscribers. Why not just tell my students to subscribe and make my life a whole lot easier? But going back to Egypt, which is my job here and what I actually have to talk about. Okay, so what you have happening with these Heliopolitan priests, right, is they worship Ra, and everything in ancient Egypt, it's the same in ancient Sumeria and in Mesopotamia, but in Egypt, it's all cyclical based on the daily patterns of the cosmos. And they are the stewards of the daily rhythms, which go on forever and ever, they believe. So when the sun rises in the east, that's Ra emerging in the sun boat with the baboons of Mart on the prow of the boat, generating order. And that's what we see because the sun goes across the sky in a certain directional trajectory according to the seasons, year in and year out, season in and season out. So it never changes, right? Unless there's a storm or unless there's an eclipse, then that's a bad omen. It's a bad sign. It's a portent of something ominous. But daily, the sunboat rises. And on his entourage on the sunboat, you have Ra. There he is. No, well, yes, that's the sun disk of Ra, but he's got the head of Horus here. He's like a combination of Horus, the eagle god, and Ra. The sun tells you that it's Ra. He's enthroned on the sunboat. Ra is also embodied by Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is both the son of Ra and the embodiment of Ra. Okay. And here you have what used to be a bad guy, Seth, who gets rehabilitated into a good guy on the prow of the boat. Why are you laughing? Seth. You can tell them that that's where some scholars think the name Satan came from as well, Seth, because he's such a bad guy. Yeah, they think. They don't. It's not. Don't quote me. It's Norman Cohen who says that in his Cosmos, Chaos, and the World to Come. You're going to pick on your friends now. You can blame me. But Seth is on the prow. He's been rehabilitated in the myth because he helped to kill Osiris, the god of the underworld, the main god of the underworld, right? In the Osiris myth, which is there in the notes. You can learn about the Osiris myth. It's very interesting. Seth's job is to, on behalf of Ra, when the sun sets in the west, which is the Valley of Darkness, Egyptians only ever built their necropolis, their cemeteries to the west of the Nile. Their cities, by and large, but not exclusively, were on the east of the Nile, because that's where the sun rose. On the west, in the west, the sun boat descends, and then darkness falls upon the land. Why? Because the serpent that dwells in the Egyptian version of the underworld, the Duat, which is it both encircles the barrel underneath the earth. It's all the waters of the abyss there. There's the Duat, and beneath that is the Nun. But the Nun extends also up towards the sky, and it's kind of like in the biblical view in Genesis, waters above the earth, waters beneath the earth, right? So that's the Nun. The Duat is the underworld. And Egypt was divided into 12 regions, 12 nomes, they were called, 12 regions, and you have 12 levels of the underworld, also called nomes. In one of those nomes, not nomes in a gnome, right, but with a G, Nomes, you have the celestial serpent, Apophis, Apep, but Apophis for the Greeks. And he would threaten to devour the sunboat every night. That's why the nighttime would come, because he's fighting Apophis and Ra fighting in the underworld, right? And when the sun rises every day, we know that even though the sunboat had been swallowed by Apophis, Seth managed to spear him in the side and open up his guts, and then the sunboat came up in the morning again. right? And that happens every day. And the job of the priests of Heliopolis was to facilitate that. Whenever the new Pharaoh was crowned from Heliopolis, he had to smash effigies, representations of Apophis, and make prayers to the sun god, right? So the Pharaoh then maintains the cosmic order as an embodiment of the god, Pharaoh, against the evil serpent. Now you can see why this is relevant across the board, because the serpent crawls on its belly. It's associated with the earth, with dirt, with mud, with the passions as well, in other words, with anything earthy. What do we see in Genesis? How is the devil represented? As a serpent. The serpent also has multivalent symbolism, because even Moses lifts up the bronze serpent as a defense of the Hebrews. And Jesus, while he says in the Gospel of Matthew, I think it is, what does he say?
Oh, sorry, I had a question.
As wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. So the serpent is not entirely bad, because even Jesus, he not only says that serpents contain wisdom, which is a throwback to the god Asclepius, because the wisdom of healing, right? The ancient Greek god Asclepius has a serpent around his staff. But it's also a throwback to Moses, who lifts up the bronze serpent to defend the Israelites against the serpents. Because what does Jesus also say? As Moses lifted up the staff in the wilderness, so will the Son of Man be lifted up, in John's Gospel. Jesus is comparing himself to a snake. Very enigmatic and interesting sayings of Jesus. I'm teaching you all these things as a Christian, right? Don't think I'm going off on pagan trajectories. I love all this stuff, civilizationally, but you can see where it filters into the Christian tradition, into the Catholic tradition. It's all part and parcel of it, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Was there any like I don't know, agnostic or like people who didn't believe this literally, like amongst the Egyptians?
Who didn't believe it literally? What didn't believe what literally?
Or like similar to how like the Genesis story can be taken to be like poetry. Or was there any like Egyptians that like were recording that were like, oh, we don't actually believe the sun god gets swallowed by a snake, but rather it's like
I don't think you have anything like that in ancient Egypt. I think it would have been a worldview saturated by the religiosity. But do not mistake what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Genesis is just poetry. There's truth in Genesis, but that truth is beyond the literal word. It has to do with experiences of people who experienced God and fell away. They were the first to experience God, Adam and Eve. We are all Adams and Eve, right? That's the way that Genesis is meant to be read. Otherwise, you have a problem, because you cannot match up the creation narrative with the historical record. I mean, you can't. Is the world 6,000 years old? It's not, according to scientific inquiry. Sorry, guys. So that's my opinion. You're entitled to believe whatever you want. You can think it's 400 years old if you like. I don't mind. But I'm just saying that you have this issue that's easily circumventable when you look at how the ancients read the texts. They read them with this underlying meaning in mind. Now, that's for very, very ancient texts like Genesis. When it comes to the Gospels, did Jesus come back from the dead literally? Yes. It's a different, it's closer to home, right? So it's not, I don't mean just poetry in that kind of sense, you know. All right, yep. Yes.
If they're all like similar stories, how do we give precedence to like Christian version?
Because Christianity is different enough. If they're all similar stories, how do we give precedence to Christianity? Take the example of the demiurge. Is the creator God in all of these myths? Is the demiurge. Does something pre-exist the demiurge in the stories that I've told you? Okay, that which pre-exists the demiurge is more powerful than the demiurge. It's the material world personified as gods. So the demiurge, in shaping the world, does not create in a pure or absolute sense. He is provoked to give order to chaos. He is bound by necessity. What's the Christian belief concerning the creation of the universe? Out of nothing, which means that the creator God, the Trinitarian God, is not compelled by necessity, but creates freely. There's a difference. It's an important difference. Now, do you have virgin birth stories in these other religions? Yes. Do you have, things that look similar to Christianity, as in the God embodying a person, a man? Yes, but that's not the Christian teaching, that God embodies a man, a person. The Christian teaching is that God becomes man while remaining fully God, permanently and uniquely and forever. And that's nowhere else in any of these myths, in any of these religions. The closest proximity, one that's refined and accurately like it's nuanced, is what you see in Hinduism with the avatars, the various gods embodying gurus and then withdrawing again. Yeah, but that same God can embody many consecutive gurus and abandon their bodies, right? Is that what happens with Christ? No. So Christ takes on human nature permanently once and for all and takes it up to the divine forever, right? Is that not different? It's different. And so on and so forth. We can keep doing that. We can do it for a while, but there's no need to do it now. It's too early. Christianity is sufficiently different. And why all these similarities and all these other religions? Well, how else was God meant to prepare people for the coming of his son? It's all typology. It can all be read from a Christian point of view. Most of the great Christian authors have done that. You know, these are not stumbling blocks. They are awesome stories that you can read about. I mean, who isn't fascinated by Egypt? Egypt is fascinating. Full stop. You know, like it just is. So you have, for example, the temples, this particular temple, the forecourt of the temple of Horus in Edfu. Horus is the eagle-headed god. He's also a demiurge-like figure who's later associated with Ra, is the best preserved from the 3rd century BC. So you see the capitals here. They look as though they're Ionic capitals. So they look Doric, which means they're just flat at the top, but there's a bit of a kind of floral design on the underneath. These are, it looks like they are monolithic drums or monolithic columns, which means that they have not been cut. They have just been carved. They've been carved like that. And there's some Greek influence there. But you usually have this very imposing forecourt whenever you enter an Egyptian temple. To give you another idea of what that might look like, you can look at the Temple of Karnak, which is that's a reconstruction of the Temple of Karnak. That's what the entrance looks like. This is the view of the walkway of the sphinxes that protect the entrance to the temple. Yeah. And so if you go back up, you will see that when one enters the temple precinct, in this particular temple, you get the whole description of how the universe came to be from an Egyptian point of view, depicted in art and in the hieroglyphics. It describes the Nun, the mound, primordial mound coming out of the water. They called it the Ben stone. And then Ra emerging onto the Ben stone and creating the world out of the waters in various ways. Sometimes he uses spittle, sometimes effluence. Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just wondering how they got the date August 23rd, actually, like in the year.
There might have been because I took that information from online. That usually, and especially around this period, you'll get descriptions of when places are inaugurated. So according to whatever the months were in the Egyptian calendar, they would have worked out that it's August 23rd. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yep. Any other questions or comments? I mean, this stuff is still there. You can visit this stuff. I mean, you know, Egypt is not, I mean, on the travel index, it's not entirely safe, but it's still, I'd love to go some stage. That's the interior, the sanctuary of the temple. You can see that would have been the place where a replica of the Ben stone would have been placed, of the primordial mound, and usually a statue of the god as well would be worshipped at that central point. Okay, let me just check on our friends online. Are you guys doing all right? Yep, cool. Okay. So, and there you go again. Karnak is the best preserved, right? So if we look at the Temple of Karnak, here's a reconstruction. That's the hallway of the Sphinxes. They started building this particular temple. We're not talking about pyramids now. Pyramids have a different function. They're not temples. They're mausoleums. All right. So in 2000 BC, they started building this, and they get it done in phases. By 1650, there's a first phase. And the construction continues. It goes on for about 1,000 years on this temple precinct, okay? And you can see the monumental kind of entrance and walkway, these freestanding pylons here. Sacred lake, obelisks placed throughout. An obelisk was erected by Pharaoh. It's a petrified sun ray that's inverted. to point towards the sun god Ra. So if you look at an obelisk, what's an obelisk? An obelisk is it's a kind of freestanding vertical square rectangular column with a pyramid at the top. The pyramid is needle-like, or veliskos in Greek, is the Greek term again, means needle, and it's the pharaoh harnessing the power of the sun god and pointing it up to him, making a connection between himself as the sun god. It's a symbol of the pharaoh's authority. Is this relevant for all of the subsequent civilizations that we'll be looking at? Yes. Has anybody been to Rome? There are about 14 obelisks in Rome, placed there by Roman emperors, later appropriated by popes and put in front of various churches. Yep. Argentina, Sydney.
Yeah, it's like modern day ones that
Yeah.
just to match with like the Romans and that sort of thing that we
Yeah.
there wouldn't be that religious commitment. Like in like Sydney, I'm going to say that the one in Sydney is because you know the Prime Minister is still you know same deal.
Well, not the sun god, no, but the Freemasons. The obelisk is a symbol of enlightenment. So they would have used. No, I'm serious. That's what any obelisk. Washington Monument is a giant obelisk. Has anyone been to Washington, D.C.? Okay, that was erected. You know, the white monument, guys. I'll show you. Yeah, it's a massive obelisk. So that's there because each subsequent civilization will incorporate symbols and images from previous civilizations. We will see that especially with Greece and Rome and Christendom. It's very obvious. It's clear what it is that the Romans are borrowing from the Greeks. A little bit less clear what the Greeks are borrowing from the Egyptians, but it's also there, especially in the cosmogony, in the literary evidence. The Minoans, who are in between the Egyptians and the Greeks, the Mycenaeans, who were the first to believe in Zeus and various other gods. The Minoans have hieroglyphics as their language. They're in Crete, right? So they're like a bridge between ancient Egypt and Greece, ancient Greece and classical Greece. And everybody's borrowing from one another. Now, the Romans popularized the use of the obelisk. You thought Egypt was good. We're going to go down to Egypt, take their symbols of power and put them in the center of Rome. That's what Julius Caesar did. It's what Augustus did. It's what later Constantine the Great did and his successors, the first Christian emperor. And then the Pope said, you think your terrestrial empires are so good? I'm just going to move these obelisks in front of churches. The church is boss, and put them there. In a good way, right? They're cool. If you go and see them in Rome, there's an obelisk in front of Santa Maria Maggiore, in front of San Giovanni in Laterno, there are obelisks everywhere. Then the founding of the modern nation state, the democratic nation states, the founding fathers were usually Masons. You think your civilizations were good? We're going to show you an enlightened way. And then they use obelisks. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's the basic answer. Another question?
You put a mention on the pyramid obelisk thing. I think the Australian Parliament House is a glass pyramid surrounded by a colonnade. So it's actually a pyramid.
It's a pyramid. That's awesome. In fact, you know, Canberra was designed by Griffin, right? After whom the lake is founded, Lake Burley Griffin is founded after Burley Griffin. You know, he was an occultist. He was a theosophist. Yeah, he was knee deep in Aleister Crowley and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that doesn't make Canberra a cult necessarily. It means the guy they got for the design. Yeah, okay. All right. But you know, the concentric circles are meant to tap into ley lines to get energy out of the land. That's why Canberra is like this. Did you know it's documented? It's not me making it up. It's documented stuff. It's also quite cool, you know. I mean, at least not boring, you know, like a skyscraper or something like that. Okay, you can see these are columns in the hyperstyle hall. It just means many. Hypostylos is many. Stylos is a column in Greek, so many column hall from the 13th century BC, right? These ones date from later and are painted. Columns form a basic function. They just keep up the roof. Yeah, that's the way. These open air temples have their roofs kept up in this way. And in Greece, you will have temples kept up by columns. You have the roof, the metopo, which is the facade with the pediment and the various entablatures and designs. We're going to look at what these things are and define them when we get to Greece. on the very front of the temple in a rectangular sense in the back of the temple, but then you really get bricked in kind of spaces with columns, colonnaded porticos on the outside as like an atrium to lead people into them, and then maybe columns on the inside of a basilica or something to keep up the roof. In the Roman period, the Romans perfect that. But that's why if you go to the Parthenon, it's exposed. If you look at the Temple of Zeus at the base of the Parthenon, it's also exposed. If you go to Sunio, which is just north of Athens, dedicated to Poseidon, it's also exposed. Yeah, so that's what you get in Egypt too. That's the very famous obelisk of Karnak. Okay. Tutmosis the third, 18th dynasty. You're going back to about 13th century BC. This one here. Okay. It's very famous because it's fully preserved. And now we get to the very famous pyramids of Giza, the pyramid of Khufu, Great Pyramid, okay? Protected by the Sphinx, right? Napoleon shot the nose off of. Okay. What's going on with the pyramid? It is the first perfect pyramid, this one. So you can find more details. I think I've got them. I'll get it up with them. Details about it here. Okay, so the Great Pyramid of Khufu was built somewhere in this time range. So maybe 25th century before Christ, 25,500, 2,500 BC, right? 2,500 BC, somewhere around then. About 500 years earlier, you get the pyramids of Saqqara, which are step pyramids like that. And they look like the Mesopotamian ziggurats. They look similar. Eventually, they get a perfect pyramid. This would have been encased in gold at the top and in bronze sheeting, right? So it would have been blinding. You would have looked at it in the direct sun, you'd have to turn away, right? In fact, most of these temples and structures would have been richly decorated with various pigments within the hieroglyphs. It would have been in color. It wouldn't have been the way that we have it today. It's the same with Greece, right? Ancient Greece would have been full of color. We just don't have the pigments, did not survive. So, you know, the Great Pyramid of Khufu, it's here. It's the one with the cap. It's not that one here. It's this one here. It's the one with the cap. Okay. What is happening within is that Khufu would have been buried in the king's chamber. His wife would have been buried in the queen's chamber. And you have these shafts within their burial chambers that align with constellations, right? And those constellations are in the celestial duat. Remember, I spoke about the duat, the waters around the cosmos. The first two shafts, so on the left here, coming out of the king's chamber, they align with Orion and Draconis or Ursa Minor. Okay. That respectively symbolize Osiris, that's Orion. So Orion is the Greek equivalent of Osiris, the king of the underworld. In other words, Orion is the king of the underworld. And he can be in the underworld, but he's kind of in heaven too, right? It's all very much interchangeable. Considered the Lord of the Duat. And the dragon is the Ursa Minor. To the Egyptians, however, Ursa Minor was identified with the female hippopotamus deity, Taweret, who in the book, why is that funny? In the Book of Day and Night, dating from the time of Ramses the 6th, from the 12th century, is associated with Mesketu, the foreleg of Seth, personification of various body parts, etc. Giulio Magli demonstrates the connection between the way the Egyptians perceived Ursa Minor, the foreleg of Set, if you like, the little dipper for us in our contemporary constellations, and Mesketu that envelops it as a pair of iron adzes that were used for the opening of the mouth ritual, which was supposed to allow king to eat and drink in the afterlife. Okay, just to put that together for you, and the adzes were made of meteoric material that opened the king's mouth during the mummification process. Let me just put that together for you. King is in the middle. One of the shafts, the light comes in from the constellation of Orion. That's taking the king's soul up to Osiris, the lord of the underworld. The other shaft points to a constellation that was meant to be associated with the opening of the mouth ritual, through which the king's soul is meant to go to the afterlife. So this is basically like a springboard to heaven for the king and for the queen too. She goes somewhere else. It's described in the notes, to another realm of the underworld. Okay. If you want to read about the mummification process, the details of here, we've gone over. Do you want to finish up? This will be, I promise I won't do this to you again, okay? From next week, we'll have the 2 tutorial groups. But you seem keen to hang on. You know, if you want for another 10 minutes, we'll finish up with Akhenaten. Does that sound cool? Yeah. Okay, here he is. Look at him. Radical figure. Akhenaten, meaning the effective for the Aten, was an Egyptian pharaoh reigning in the 14th century BC, the 10th ruler of the 18th dynasty. Before the 5th year of his reign, he was known as Amenhotep IV, meaning Amun is satisfied. But he changed his name, designating himself as a representative of the Aten. As a pharaoh, he's noted for abandoning traditional ancient Egyptian religion of polytheism and introducing Atenism, the worship of one god. He actually begins to destroy representations of other gods and to hide them. And he founds a new capital city. He moves the capital from Thebes, which was prominent in the 14th century BC. So you got the shift from Memphis to Heliopolis to Thebes. At some point, some of these cities are competing for dominance. He moves it to what's now Amarna, which is near Heliopolis, opposite the water, the city of the Aten. These are the remains of what would have been a magnificent temple dedicated to the Aten. And we do have some of the boundary stelae, the boundary markers describing this is now the city dedicated to the god Aten, right? He also changes the representation, the way that the king is represented, okay? So what we have here is very different from the kind of static figures that you see in earlier hieroglyphs or bas reliefs. Do you see that the figures are very fluid? They've got curvature to them. In fact, both he and his wife Nefertiti are depicted with larger bellies and smaller heads. The sun disk is pouring down its rays, which is picked up, just to give you a bit of a shock. That's not really a shock. It is what it is. I don't really care about this kind of thing, but I'll show you. It is picked up in the icons of Pentecost, the Eastern Orthodox icons of Pentecost. Some of the earliest ones have oh, come on. Why are you so small? That's terrible. You get the idea, yeah? I'll just share it very briefly with the crew online if I can find anything on this small laptop. Yeah, you can kind of see it there, right? The Holy Spirit coming down as tongues of fire. Okay, now I can stop the share. And I will share the... Yeah, so artistically, the church picked it up. There's no problem. I mean, it used it, right? Where did it find it is the interesting thing. Because Akhenaten and Akhenaten, its ruler, and Akhenaten, the city, were so divisive, this imposed monotheism from the ruler that put aside all the other gods in preference of this one god, with an emphasis on his family. He was a remarkably feminist king, right? Because he really promoted his wife Nefertiti. Other pharaohs didn't do that before. He promoted the idea of his family. Do you see they're nursing children here? They look like little alien babies. They've got the elongated heads which symbolize wisdom, right? Okay. He was so radical that after he died and he was forced out of rule, his grandson, Tutankhamun, under the patronage of his own parents, actually, changed the worship back to the traditional gods and wiped out any reference to Akhenaten or Akhenaten. It's a process known as damnatio memoriae in Latin, damning the memory of the person who came before so that it is like they never existed. And it's something that the Roman emperors pick up later on. But that's the last thing that I wanted to show you, because the next stage in radical monotheism, it's not until the Jews, right? And maybe it's around this time, a little bit later, you get Moses, you know, and you get the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament being written, which points towards a growing realization that there's one true God. And that'll affect art and architecture in Israel. Okay? Thanks for today.